Um, okay, well, thank you very much for the invitation today. I'm going to go through a few things, particularly around sport management, but particularly related to the global governance and some of the things that we do on the sport management course at the University of Portsmouth. I'll also give you a bit of an idea of the university, and some of the things we do within our school as well, after I've spoken a little bit about the sport management sector. And I'll also give you an idea about some of our past students. We were hoping to have one of our alumni and a past student here today. Unfortunately, we couldn't, but I've got some information from our past students about their career destinations, what they've done, and that sort of thing. So I'll give you a bit of an idea about some of the areas within sport management in particular that you can work once you've done either undergraduate or postgraduate degree in sport management. So my name is Dr. Tom Webb. I'm the course leader for the MSc in sport management. So that's the postgraduate master's degree. We also have other courses as well within the school. And again, I'll touch on that a little bit as I go through today. So one of the key things I think that is really important with sport management is really what is it? Okay, because lots of people talk about it, but it's really important to understand before you embark on a sport management course what is important and why it's important. Now, one of the big things is around this idea of globalization. Okay, and we do a lot of work in terms of engagement with global agencies, and that can be through teaching, and it can be through the course, and it can also be through research as well. And again, I'll come on to some of those opportunities and examples as we go. But in terms of professional bodies, as academics and people that teach on the course, I have a number of staff which teach on the course as well. And we're all involved with organizations that are global. And these are from a sport management teaching and research perspective. So on the left-hand side there, you can see some of these professional bodies, such as the European Association for Sport Management, the North American Society for Sport Management, and the New Zealand and Australian Association for Sports Management. We work with people in all of these different organizations. We're based in Portsmouth in the UK. But because of the technology that's now available, we can work with people in these different parts of the world. As an example, I'll talk about some of our research later, but we're actually in the process of submitting a book for publication, which is looking at global sport management education from different perspectives. And we're working with colleagues in Australia and the United States on that book. And that's myself and Dr. Mike Rayner at the University of Portsmouth. So we work with people all around the world, and this is important because sport management is a global industry, and this is really important to understand. What's also important are the emerging trends, which I've got on the left-hand side, on the right-hand side there of the screen. And I said about sport management being a global sector, that's really important. And what's also important, as I mentioned there, is that lots of different countries are becoming involved in sport management and have growing sport management industries. And this is happening in a growing number of countries. So I mentioned the US, the UK, Australia, but you also have Canada, New Zealand, India is increasing in terms of its sport management provision. So is China, so is Japan. And so lots of different countries are starting to look at this. And one of the reasons for this is this increased financial input from professional sports. And I'm sure some of you know about the Premier League in England and the money that's in the Premier League in England in terms of football. But there's also competitions in other countries, such as the Indian Premier League, the IPL, which is cricket. And there's lots of money associated to that. And there's sports and franchises in the US, such as the NBA, basketball, NFL, American football, to name two. And also you obviously have baseball and things like that. So there's money at the top of these games, and the money has come from TV revenue, sponsorship, and things like that. And what that's meant is that there's been increased financial input across sport, because if the money's at the top of the game, it trickles down. And so what that does is it provides opportunities for work, but it also provides opportunities for students to study and work around the world, which is why I'm involved in this webinar today. Our graduates have taken many of these opportunities. They've been involved in both study and work in different countries. And in particular, after they've finished their course, they've gone and worked in other countries after the sport management master's course. And again, I'll touch on some of these things a bit later and give you some examples of that. But I've already mentioned about working with global agencies and why this is important in terms of this governance idea. Well, that's important because what happens in this global approach that we take at Portsmouth mirrors what happens in sport management around the world. It's a global industry. If I take the Premier League in England as an example, the Premier League is obviously an English league in football, but it's broadcast around the world. The television rights are sold all over the world. The sponsorship deals are sold all around the world. And the teams in the Premier League are owned by people from all over the world. So it's not just a league that exists in the UK. It exists all around the world, and it's one of the most successful sporting leagues anywhere in the world. That's really important because of this global nature of sport. We also have to work globally in terms of the course we provide and in terms of academics. And on the second point here, our research is also global. So I conduct research with a number of different agencies and organizations and people that work in sport, both in education and in the professional game. And this is currently taking place in countries such as Canada, Australia, the US, Germany. We've worked in the Netherlands, France, Italy, and Spain before. And all of these things mean that we bring this information and this research back to the course, because our course that we teach at Portsmouth on the Sport Management Masters is research informed. And that means that our research informs what we deliver on the course. What this also means is that this provides engagement with relevant agencies and governing bodies. And governing bodies can be things like UEFA and FIFA in football. And I've worked with both of those organizations. It can be organizations like World Netball, who we're doing a study with at the moment. It can be organizations like the FA in England, the Football Association, or the Rugby Football Union, the RFU. And working with these organizations is really important because that means that the work we're doing is reflected in what we teach on the course. And this means that we contribute then to knowledge in sport management and sport more widely. So in terms of these global research networks, this is one that I've coordinated and I manage. So I set this research network up. My research is around referee and match officials, so sports officials. That could be referees in football. It could be umpires in cricket. We work with all different sports and people all around the world. And this is just one example of these global networks that we have at Portsmouth, which is really important because it is reflective of the wider sport management industry, and that's really important. One of the current research projects that's going on at the moment that I'm involved with is looking at the growth and participation of female sports officials across Europe. So we're working with organizations such as the European Hockey Federation, Sports Officials UK, the Dutch Olympic Committee, the International Federation for Sports Officials, European Athletics, lots of big organizations, which again is really important because this information and this work that we do informs what we teach on the Sport Management Master's degree. And that's really important because as students, you come and study in this global environment that we create at Portsmouth through the work we do, the work we do with other people around the world. And as I say, we bring that back to the course. Also, what's really important to emphasize on the course at Portsmouth is that students that we have come from all over the world. We have students from Japan, we've had students from China, we've got students from Pakistan, India, the USA, all over, as well as UK students all over the world. And that's really important because that reflects the work we do, and that also reflects the sport management industry, which, as I say, is globalized. So these are all really important points to emphasize. And this is really important because the governance that I've talked about in sport management is often global. And to understand that, we can look at processes and organizations. But we really need to understand what this idea of sport governance is. And the reason I've picked sport governance to focus on in this presentation is because sport governance runs across the concepts of sport management, okay? And why that's important is explained in these definitions here. So the definition of sport governance is the exercise of power with consideration given to influence, authority, and the nature of decision-making. Governance can occur at local, state, national, and international levels. Now, that's really important because we're talking about the influence and authority and nature of decision-making related to power, but we're also talking about local, national, and international interrelationships. And that's really important. We've already talked about this global sport management industry, and you can start to see how this idea of sport governance fits into this wider industry, if you like. However, as the bottom point says, there's no agreed set of governance principles and language relevant for international, national, provincial, state, and local level sport governance organizations. What that means is it's really hard to define. So although we can say this is what sport governance is, organizations can interpret it in different ways. And also they run themselves very differently as well. So how FIFA organizes and governs itself is different to how the International Olympic Committee runs and governs itself. And that might be different to how the Football Association in England runs and governs itself. Okay, so that's really important to understand. Whilst we can understand what sport governance is, those organizations can interpret that slightly differently. But what's really important is to understand how this idea of governance fits into sport and sport management. Well, we can look at national governance as one example. So Sport England is an organisation in England that's funded by the UK government, or it receives funding from the UK government. And they distribute this funding to organisations that apply for money. Okay, and this organisation therefore has to have a code of governance, which I've given an example of here. And they say this code for sport governance is about organisations seeking funding for sport and physical activity, and that these organisations must meet gold standards of governance considered to be among the most advanced in the world. So again, this idea of governance, although we're talking here about an example that's national, the organisation, Sport England, is talking about what this means in a global context, because they're saying that the governance procedures must meet their gold standard, which is among the most advanced in the world. So that's important. We also have an organisation called UK Sport. They also have a code for sport governance. UK Sport in England fund our Olympic athletes. And so there's a lot of money that comes through UK Sport that's then distributed to these Olympic athletes for them to perform at the Olympic Games. But again, they must have a code for sport governance in order to run themselves effectively, but also to demonstrate that they are responsible when they are distributing the money to these Olympic athletes. We also have an organisation called the Sport and Recreation Alliance, and they work with lots of different organisations, and they have come up with this idea of the principles of good governance for sport and recreation, which is designed to provide any type and size of organisation with a practical and user-friendly model to implement best practice. So sports can take this guide and implement some of the things that are in the guide. And again, this is really important because this idea of governance is something which is really important because these organizations need to make sure that these concepts of governance are embedded within how they operate. And that, again, is really essential. But we can also look at global governance. So I've given you examples from England and from the UK. But I talked about organizations like FIFA and UEFA. Well, if we look on the left-hand side, a tweet from the FIFA media team referenced an address from the president, Gianni Infantino, and he welcomed the Football Governance Business and Values Report, which provides clear support to FIFA's ongoing reform of the transfer system, for example, in football, and the regulation of agents. So you can see we're not just talking about governance as something which we teach you on the course, which we give you some ideas about. It's something which happens in sport at the highest level all the time. And that's really important. And then on the right-hand side, we also talked about UEFA, and there's an example here with the headline UEFA governance model reinforced by EU sports ministers. The Council of the EU adopts resolution on European sport model and underlines the central role of governing bodies in value-based organised sport in Europe. So again, we're seeing this idea of sport governance in action. This is what UEFA have come up with, their model, this governance model, and politicians that are involved with the European Union, the sports ministers, have said that this is really important and that it's something that's central and should be central to how sport is organised and managed. We can also see the International Olympic Committee, the IOC, and they actually have a risk and assurance governance model. And you can see, I won't go through the whole model now, but again, how this is applied by the IOC and how they embed the idea of governance within their organisation. So it links directly to the executive board, to the committees, the ethics commissions, the functional commissions, the director general, and then all these different areas at the bottom of that model linked to this idea on the right-hand side of an external audit, and that's there to measure the IOC and how they operate. And again, that's something which governance provides us the ability to do. And that's why in sport management, the concept of governance is something which is essential to cover within the course. We can also link this idea to tournaments. We've just held the FIFA World Cup in Qatar 2022 at the end of last year. In November and December. And of course, these tournaments need to be governed. They need to operate. And to do that, you have to understand the governance models of the organization like FIFA and also the tournament itself. There's lots of different parts and organizations that are involved in organizing and managing a tournament like the FIFA World Cup. And that comes from the organization like FIFA, the host country like Qatar, and the cities that these stadiums are built in. Most of them are in Doha. But again, it can be things linked to how fans are transported to and from the city. There'll be plans around the movement of people, the movement of the teams that are involved, the venues. There's so much planning and management and governance that goes into the organisation of these tournaments. And again, that's something which is essential to understand. But what is that? What does that mean? What is good governance? We've talked about governance and why it's important and why we teach it. But what does good governance mean? Well, Girat in 2018 talks about the idea of good governance and breaks it down into 4 different areas, namely transparency, democratic processes, internal accountability and control, and societal responsibility. Now, we can break these down further. So the idea of transparency in governance is all about the reporting of the organization's own internal workings. And if I flick back here, that's what the IOC are doing on this slide. They are reporting on their internal workings. That's what that organizational chart is all about. That's what this model is doing. It's saying this is how we operate and this is how governance is applied. So that's really important, this idea of transparency. There's also this notion of democratic processes, which is about free, fair and competitive elections and open internal debates within the organization. Now, again, if I flick back here, that's probably something which FIFA and UEFA have been criticized for historically, that the decisions they make and the elections that they have are maybe not as transparent as they could be. And so FIFA are certainly taking steps to be able to say that they are more transparent. And that's why that story on the left-hand side is important, because they're welcoming the Football Governance Business and Values report, because they're trying to be more transparent and open in terms of their democratic processes. The third point, internal accountability and control, is about the separation of powers within the organization's governance structure and to a system of rules and procedures that ensures staff and officials compliance with internal rules and norms. So it means, how does the organization run itself? how does it organize itself, and what is the structure within the organization? And that's all about that internal accountability and control. And then the final point is societal responsibility. And that refers to deliberately directing the organization to have a positive effect on internal and external stakeholders and society at large. That's really essential to a lot of these big organizations like the IOC, like FIFA, and like UEFA. They need to demonstrate that they're working with internal and external stakeholders, and they're having a difference in terms of society and the things they do in the wider world. And governance and good governance can provide us mechanisms to examine whether these organizations are doing that. But there are issues, okay? And I've touched on some of these already. We need to understand that there are gaps in our knowledge related to governance. And I said that it's difficult to define, and organizations apply the notions of governance differently. And so it is quite a difficult concept. As I've already talked about, it's quite vague sometimes. What is good governance? Well, we can use definitions like this, and Gerhard provided these areas of good governance that we looked at on the last slide, but that's not something which is uniform throughout the literature and the research. So we need to have a good understanding of what good governance is and how it works in sport. There are also sometimes unclear reasons for implementation. So why do organizations ensure that they have good governance? Is it for the right reasons, for example? Sometimes it is, but sometimes people might say organizations focus on these ideas of governance, but they don't really put some of the practices into their structures. So we need to understand that and then question why that might be. It's also unclear in terms of impact. So how do we measure what good governance is? Well, I put up the chart from the IOC, the model that they have put out. We can look at things like that, but how do we know if they're actually doing it? So again, things like that are important to measure and consider as questions. But what we do know is that many sporting agencies are involved and they are required to consider governance. I've shown you some of the biggest sports organizations in the world and how they look at sport governance. And that's something which is across the sport management sector. They need to look at governance, what governance is, and then how it's implemented within their organizations. And again, these are things that we cover. These are questions that we cover particularly on the sport management MSc at the University of Portsmouth. So that's given you an idea of the concept of governance and what it is and how we look at it and why it's important in this big area of sport management. And we also looked at what sport management involves in terms of an industry. But I'm also conscious that we need to think a little bit about the School of Sport, Health and Exercise Science. So I work within this school at the University of Portsmouth, and the sport management programs, both at undergraduate BSc level and at postgraduate MSc level, are housed within the School of Sport, Health and Exercise Science at the University of Portsmouth. So the school is very successful. As you can see from this slide, we have a lot of successes. So things like we're rated excellent by our students, and we have a national student survey in the UK. We are rated as excellent by our students. Those are students that have come through the school and graduated. We're in the top 10% of sports sports providers in terms of our school within the country. We also have something called the Athena Swan Bronze Award, which is something about inclusivity and how we integrate people and students and staff within our school. We have 35 academic staff and approximately 900 students, so we're quite a big school, and that's at undergraduate, postgraduate level, and also research students. So that could be PhD students, masters by research students, and things like that. And that also includes the sport management courses that I've mentioned. And then we've got our graduates, and we have excellent first-time progression rates, good degrees, and graduate employment measures as well. So these are all things that are really, really essential to our school and things that we've done exceptionally well over the last few years and are important to emphasize. Now, in terms of the school, this is our building at the top left-hand side. It's actually a shot before we renamed the school. So you can see It was called the Department of Sport and Exercise Science, and it's now the School of Sport, Health and Exercise Science. So it's changed a little bit, but that's our building. We're actually going to be moving to a new purpose-built building in the next few years, but this building will be there for the next couple of years until the new building is built. We also have our own facilities, such as this strength and conditioning here. And then hopefully, if this works, we also have a new sports centre, which is millions and millions of pounds. And I'm just going to play the video now for you. Oh, hang on. Hang on a minute. You just try and go across to that video. Let me just see, it's just come out of there. There we go. So it should be working. So I'll go back to the start. So this is the new multi-million-pound sports centre, which we use and is part of some of the teaching and things like that we do, but also that students have access to. So this only opened a few months ago, but so it gives you an idea of one of the new facilities involved in sport at Portsmouth. So I'll just play the video for you now. Okay, so hopefully that gives you a good idea of some of the new facilities there. So I'll just stop sharing that and then go back to my presentation. But it gives you a good idea of some of the things that are happening at the University of Portsmouth. So again, that just gives you a demonstration of the facilities and the new facility in particular at the university. And the university is investing a lot in sport and the sport area. So that's really important. So in terms of the courses in sport management, well, this is the undergraduate program. I won't go through everything related to it, but we look at various areas, and there's different study abroad options within the course. We have work-based learning, professional development. All of these things are important because what they provide is students with opportunities to get involved in the sector of sport management, if you like, the world of work and placement and study opportunities. And this is something we value really, really highly at Portsmouth. So this is all part of the undergraduate program in sport management. And then we also have the admissions information here. So I thought that was important just to flag up when I'm talking about the course. Again, I've put the link at the top, and that's the link to the information specific to Japan for the undergraduate program. But again, it tells you exactly what those requirements are. So what the course code is, what you need to apply, and where you get that information from as well. And also some of the open days that we do and virtual things and things like that as well. But you can find all that information on the website. But I just wanted to make sure I directed you to that in case you were interested in that course or know anyone that is. But in terms of postgraduate opportunities, I already said I teach on the MSc in Sport Management. That's my course here. And that's what we've been looking at a little bit today. We also have other postgraduate master's courses. So sport and exercise psychology, the clinical exercise science course, applied exercise physiology, strength conditioning and rehab, sport performance and analysis. And we also have the MSc, which is in physiotherapy, which I think is actually just starting to accept the students, although not international students at the moment, but that's coming in the next few months. But in terms of sport management, that's where the course sits at MSc level, alongside all these other courses that we also teach at MSc level. So lots of opportunities there. In terms of the MSc in sport management, the admissions for sport management are a 2-2 honours degree or equivalent in sport, business or management. Applicants who hold a non-related degree are considered on a case-by-case basis. So we do look at every single application, even if those applicants do not have a degree which is specific to business, management, or sport. The English language requirements are proficiency at minimum of IELTS band 6.5 with no component score below 6. So that's what we ask for in terms of the sport management program. And I mentioned some of the things that we cover. We've talked about governance, obviously, today, and that fits into the module I do, which is Principles, Practice and Governance in Sports Management. You can see that towards the bottom of the page on the left-hand side. We also have modules on managing human resources, strategic leadership, global sport event management, research, development, and practice. And that's where your dissertation is and things like that, where your research component fits. I mentioned about some of the research that we do as well. These are some of the books that myself and my colleagues have published. So Mike Rayner published a book on rugby union professionalization. Myself and Mike also published this book on sport management education, global perspectives and implications for practice. That really informs our curriculum on the sport management MSc. I've also published books on elite soccer referees, you can see there, and then referees, match officials, and abuse, again, with colleagues from all around the world. And that's really important because those books and the research that we do, again, informs what we teach on the course. And you can see that from what those books are and what they cover compared to what we deliver on the sport management program in terms of the modules. So what else do we do? What else is on offer? Well, we have lots and lots of things that we do at the university and within the school. We have an agreement with the football club, Portsmouth Football Club. The university actually sponsors the football club, so we have a very good relationship with them, and there's lots of opportunities for students at the football club and around the football club. We have qualifications which students can get, voluntary experience that's run by our sister department, if you like, Sport and Recreation, who manage all the facilities, the sports facilities and things like that. We have a careers and employability service for students to help them get experience, but also jobs after they finish studying. We have interview boot camps and CV building, curriculum vitae building to help you develop as students before you go into the world of work. We have lots of alumni activities and conferences. As an example, for one of my modules, I have alumni that come in and speak on the module and talk to students as part of that module. We also have Student Innovation and Enterprise Awards, where students can apply for money to help them develop. They might have a specific coaching award they want to get or a qualification alongside their degree. That's a competitive process that students can apply as part of and get additional funding to help them with that. And we also have career development prizes and things like that as well, which students can apply for. So lots and lots of things that that students can get involved with and apply for, as well as part of the courses that we offer at the university and within the School of Sport, Health and Exercise Science. These are just agencies that we've worked with. And again, I won't go through all of them, but they're also agencies that we've worked with fairly regularly. So people like UEFA, the Football Club, UK Sport, the British Olympic Association, the Football Association, lots and lots of big names there that we've worked with within the School of Sport, Health and Exercise Science, and that we continue to work with on a regular basis. And again, this is essential because it informs what we teach students and the work that we do. So the final part of my presentation is really around what can you do with your degree, particularly related to sport management. Well, we've got lots of students that have gone into lots of different areas of sport, and there are different sectors of sport. So you've got the private sector, you've got the public sector, and you've got the voluntary sector. And we've had students that have worked in all these different areas. The private sector has a focus on profit, on money, and the commercialization of sport. The public sector has a focus on government involvement at national and local level, and market failure focus, which is about the more involvement, the better, for a range of social issues. And the voluntary sector is about localized clubs, non-commercial gain, and sport more widely. So the IOC would come into this as well. but those sectors often overlap, and you can see from that diagram there, they overlap and they interlink. And again, people can get jobs and employment in all of these different sectors. And we've had students that have done that as well. And there are lots of career pathways within this structure. So again, I've just picked a few that some of our students have gone into. Things like lifestyle management, water-based recreation, sport event organization and sport event management, coaching, sports science support, teaching, postgraduate research and study, that could be PhDs, for example, local and self-employed business, health and fitness, health promotion, sports injuries, services in the military, sports development, sales and marketing, and also local council and government as well. So lots and lots of different pathways that potential for employment after students finish their study with us. But what I also wanted to do is just give you some specific examples. So these are some of the organizations that students have gone and worked for. So FC Barcelona, Newcastle United, the Rugby Football Union, World Rugby, Melbourne Storm, lots and lots of organizations that students have worked with. And what you can start to see is this is all around the world. This is not just in the UK. And this goes right back to what I talked about at the start of the presentation about sport management being a global industry and being essential to be looked at from a global perspective. And this is some examples of some of our students. As I said, we were hoping we would have an alumni with us today or someone that could talk to you a little bit more about what they've done in their careers, but unfortunately they weren't available. But I can give you some examples of some of the students that we've had and some of the things they've done. So this is Ganesan, and Ganesan graduated in 2018 in the sport management program. He is now part of the Global Soccer Conclave, and he's head of PR and communications there back in India. So he came and studied over in the UK with us and then went back home to India and is now being very successful in this organization. And I actually presented in a big organized event, the Global Soccer Conclave that Ganesan organized a couple of years ago. So he's doing really, really well after graduating. This is Abe. Abe did our undergraduate sport management program and is now founder and CEO at All Broad Sports. He's worked with organizations such as My Scout and lots of different organizations, but Abe really wanted to get into the innovation and entrepreneurial side of sport management, and he launched his own company, which is All Broad Sports. And he's, again, done really well since graduating. This is Tak. Tak graduated from the MSc in sport management in 2017. And again, Tak went back to Tokyo and worked in various roles within sport management. And this is him when he was involved with the MSc. He also worked at Fratton Park as part of the organisational agreement with Portsmouth Football Club. And this is Tak at Fratton Park just before he went in to start work there. This is Mizuki. Mizuki did our sport management program, graduated a number of years ago now, and again, has gone on to work in various roles within the sport management sector. So she came and studied with us and then went back to Japan, and as I said, worked in various different roles within sport management. And this is Maki. So Maki was in the same year group as Mizuki and graduated in 2012. And you can see from Maki's business card here, there's a picture of Maki on her graduation day with some of the other students. Maki has recently been the relations coordinator for the Tokyo 2020 and Olympic Games and the 2020 Paralympic Games as part of the organizing committee. So she's part of the customer relations team and the relations coordinator for the Americas. So really important job role. And again, something which she's gone into after graduating from the sport management programs at the University of Portsmouth. So I just wanted to identify some of these ex-students and some of the things they've gone on to do, and particularly these international students who come and study in Portsmouth and then go and work in different places around the world, but within the sport management sector. So I think that's something which is really important to highlight. So, coming to the end of my presentation, we've gone through loads of different things, and I know it's a lot of information that I've given you, but hopefully you found it useful, particularly the information about sport management and what governance is in relation to sport management, some of the work we do at the University of Portsmouth from a global perspective in terms of our research and teaching, and also what we do in terms of the programs and what we deliver and some of our students and what they've gone on to achieve afterwards. If you are interested in admissions, Dr. Jenny Burbidge heads up the admissions for the School of Sport, Health and Exercise Science. Her contact details are there at the top. Underneath that are the central admissions team at the University of Portsmouth and their contact details. You also have my contact details, which are at the start of the presentation. And if you're interested in the MSc in sport management, then by all means, feel free to get in touch with me. I can provide further information on that. You also have the website, the School of Sport, Health and Exercise Science. So if you just Google that, School of Sport, Health and Exercise Science, University of Portsmouth, you'll get a link to that website, and it will provide you with information and more information about the school, the university, and the courses as well. That just remains for me to say thanks very much for listening. There's contact details there. There's the Twitter link to our University of Portsmouth Sports Science pages, but also there's the links here to our global colleagues at the University of Portsmouth. And again, you feel free to get in touch with them if you have any questions or interested in finding out more about anything I've talked about today. I will leave it there. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you so much for your presentation. While we wait for questions from students, can I ask some questions?
Yeah.
Do you have any idea of the class size in your course? Like some student wants to be in like kind of small size classes rather than in a big room.
Yeah, so what we do is we have 2 intakes for the MSc in sport management, which is January and September. So if you come in those intakes, you'll be part of an intake. And usually that's around 20 to 25 students for each intake. Now, what we do within the course is we'll have some sessions where all those students are together. We'll have other sessions where they might be broken down into smaller groups and things like that. So we teach it in a variety of different ways, but the students that are on the course come from all over the world, as I mentioned. So you might be in the January intake or you might be in the September intake, but we try and get those students integrated and talking to each other as much as possible so that they meet people from the first day at Portsmouth.
Thank you. So there's one question from saying, how many Japanese students are staying at Portsmouth University? Do you have any ideas, like just on sports management?
How many are at the university as a whole? Yeah, it's around 20,000 students, I think, in total. So those are obviously undergraduate, postgraduate, research degree students. Some of them are taught in different places, so they're not all necessarily in Portsmouth. It varies from year to year, but Portsmouth's a reasonably big university in the UK.
Do you know how many Japanese students are there?
I don't know that number off the top of my head. No, I know on our course we have Japanese students fairly regularly on sport management, as I've demonstrated with some of the ex-students, but I don't know how many there are across the university, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you. Okay, one more question.
Yeah.
Do you think do you know if the students tend to get a job in the UK, or do they tend to go back to their country and get their job?
It depends on the student. Yeah, some stay in the UK and work in the UK. The visa at the moment allows students to stay after they study. So some do that. Yeah, absolutely. Some like to study and then go back home and get a job there. As I talked about, some of our students have done that. Other students come to study in the UK and then they might go to another country to work, not back home, but to a different country. I think sport management is quite unique in that it provides students with those opportunities. So you can study in one country and go and work in another, or stay in that country and work, or go and work in a different country or back home. So yeah, it differs from student to student. We've had students that have done all of those different things.
Okay, thank you. It may be related to that, but this is a question for me. But is there any internship opportunity for like undergraduate course?
Yes, there is. Yeah, we have a sandwich year option, so students can do a sandwich year where they work in industry for a year. We also have a study abroad year option as well as part of the undergraduate programs. So yes, that is open to students. Some students want to do that, some don't. So it's up to the student. They don't have to do that. If they are interested in that, they can apply for that and look at that process.
Thank you. Is that internship tend to be in like Portsmouth area, or is it going to be like it really depends on the internship job they're doing?
Yeah, it depends. Yeah, it doesn't have to be in Portsmouth. Again, we've had students that have stayed in Portsmouth. We've had others that go to other places and do it. And again, that it depends on the opportunities that are available.
Okay, thank you. There's one more question from student saying that I think they are wondering which country they should study. Like I think they still don't know if they should study in the UK or in the US. I think it's quite difficult to answer, but
yeah, it depends. Yeah, it depends on the student. I work with people in the United States. I've been to the United States many times for work, for research, conferences, that sort of thing. I love it there. But I live and work in the UK, and the UK education system is very, very good. So it's really down to the individual and what they think they might prefer. I mean, at Portsmouth, we've had international students for many, many years, and it's really important for us because we see international students as really providing a real inclusivity within our university, and that's really important for us. And on the sport management program, I talked about sport management being a global industry, so therefore we should have students from all around the world. That's really important, and something we actively like to encourage. So certainly at Portsmouth, we encourage and we really welcome international students. I'm sure universities in the US would as well. I can only talk from our perspective, but it's down to the individual, where they would prefer to study, I guess.
Okay, thank you. I think you mentioned about the study abroad program. Do you know like which country they're going to do that?
There are lots of different countries. So we have agreements with people in Canada, Australia, I think India. There's lots of different agreements, and there are there are agreements happening all the time. I don't know every single agreement off the top of my head, but I know we have agreements with organizations in those countries, also the US as well. So yeah, there's lots of opportunity there. And again, that's up to the individual student if they want to do that. We don't make it compulsory because some students don't want to do that. But it is an option if they're interested in that as undergraduates, yeah.
Okay, thank you. There's another question saying that I want to be a sports scientist in the Premier League club someday. And if I want to start my career as a sports scientist, should I start with a second or third division club?
Could they start with what, sorry?
Start with a second or third division club. But
Yeah, if you want to do that, it's unlikely you get a job straight away in a Premier League club. You would probably have to get a job with clubs at different levels and then work your way up. That's pretty much the same as any industry. It's not to say you couldn't go straight in and get a job at the Premier League, but you know, it's much more difficult, obviously. Usually people will get jobs and then develop and then go up to something like the Premier League.
Thank you. Okay, I think that's pretty much all for today, I think. Yeah, I think that's all for today. Thank you very much, Tom, for joining today.
No problem. Thank you very much and lovely to meet everyone.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
はい。それでは本日これで終了いたします。ありがとうございました。